So Fabrice, as we are short of time.
Thank you very much, Robert. It's a very nice introduction. Maybe we can have the first slide. So during this presentation, I'm going to explain what I've been doing in Southeast Asia, what I've been doing in Laos for so many years. And I would start to say that everything started because thanks to Professor Copins, I was my PhD director. I was studying at that time the human population of the Far East during the late Pleistocene. And after that PhD, I met two very important people in my career. It was Professor Havantan from Hanoi University, Institute of Archaeology in Hanoi, and Dr. Tongsa Sayavongkamdi. He was a former General Director at the Ministry of Culture in Laos. And I met these two people during a symposium at the Indo-Pacific Prehistory Association in Taipei. It was in 2000. And Professor Havantan told me that he had in his office a cast of a skull, apparently Homo erectus, found by Jacques Fromager in the 30s. And this skull had been found in Laos by Jacques Fromager, and nobody knew where was the location of the site. So I got very excited about it, and that's how I set up a team with my French colleague and later international colleagues. And in 2003, we started to work in Laos, and also thanks to Professor Sema, who supported our mission for 8 years. At that time, he was part of the archaeological board of the Ministry of French Foreign Affairs. So we went back to Laos with Tongsa Sayavongkamdi as a partner. And Tongsa spent many years in Laos trying to find the location of this famous site where Fromager was working. Jacques Fromager was the chief of a Service Geologic of Indochina from 1929 to 1936. And he spent all his time doing surveys in all the northern Indochina that was comprising at that time northern Laos and northern Vietnam. And he was there to draw maps, to identify natural resources, mines, but also he was very interested in paleontology and paleoanthropology. Okay. Everyone has seen so many of these maps since yesterday and today again. This shows you the genus, the homogeneous distribution. So Homo genus was born in Africa and then left Africa and started to spread through Eurasia, into Europe and in the Far East and Southeast Asia. And Homo sapiens, sorry, I mean, it's hard to read, it's very small. Homo sapiens also was born in Africa and started to live in Africa sometimes around 300 to 200,000 years ago and started to spread everywhere in Eurasia, settled in the Far East, in Southeast Asia, and went down to Australia around 50,000 years ago. And he went also to the north of the region, crossed the Beringia around 30,000 and settled in the Americas and Southern America, maybe around 30,000 years ago. So we have a lot of fossils from that period in Eurasia, a little in the Far East, and very little in Southeast Asia. The oldest well-dated Homo sapiens fossils found in the Far East are, for me, the Chinese fossils, quite a few of them. Xuchang, 100,000 years old. Xujayao, 125 to 100,000 years old. Zirandong, 100,000 years old. Tianyuan, 40,000, and Lunadong, recently published by my colleague Christopher Bay, 170 to 126,000. That's it, I would say, for the Far East, and for Southeast Asia, there is Lida Aceh on Sumatra Island, published by Kira Westaway not so long ago, dating from 73 to 63,000. Nia Cave in Malaysia, 37,000. And Tabon fossils in the Philippines, dated to 47,000. It shows you that in the middle, mainland Southeast Asia, so far we had no fossils at all. And it's easy to understand. The region is a tropical region where the muson is there since hundreds of years. And it rains a lot, 5 months a year. It's very, very humid in that region. And the rain is naturally acid. And when it falls on the sandstone, the karstic landscape, it dissolves the sandstone that gives clay, and this dissolution of the sandstone gives cavities, caves, where sediment can be washed in. That's what is happening in mainland Southeast Asia. So why I've been very interested in working in that region? Because this region is clearly at the cross path between the Australasia peopling and the Australia, and to the north, to the Beringia and the Americas. So finding fossils in that region could help to answer the question of the regional continuity or replacement of the population there, and also to fill up this gap of a lack of fossils, clearly from 100,000 to 40,000 years ago in mainland Southeast Asia. So where I've been working, it's in the northeast of Laos, in Wapan province. This shows you the northern Vietnam and northern Laos, and you see in the middle the border. I cannot show you here, but there is a border, and delimited by the anamitic chain, so not very high mountainous chain. The highest peaks are around 2,000 meters. And this chain ran from the north to the brown area, down to practically the middle of the country of Laos. Which one? No, I cannot see at all. So that's the region. At the far back, you can see the anamitic chain. And that's where Jacques Fromaget started to survey. And that's the only and solid picture I found from Fromaget in this landscape. And you can notice there are two men on the picture. On the left one, you can recognize him by the colonial helmet and holding, as all geologists do, his hammer. And that's a closer picture of him on the left. And for the story, there were two very important people at that time, in the 1930s, in Indochina. Jacques Fromaget on the left, and Madeleine Colany. Madeleine Colany was an archaeologist, also interested in paleoanthropology and paleontology. And for the story, Madeleine Colany was working for the École Française d'Extrême-Orient that had his office in Hanoi. And that's the picture above her. And Jacques Fromaget also had his office at what is now the Geological Museum in Hanoi. And actually, these two buildings are facing one to each other. There is only one street separating them. And I suspect that they were not very friends, on the field. They never published anything, any paper together. And I suspect that every morning they were trying to spy at them and through the window. So going to the site found by Jacques Fromaget. So it's not really easy to go. It's about on direct line from Hanoi, 80 kilometers, so it's not very far. It's just across the border of Vietnam. But from Vientiane, it's 12 hours driving through the mountain. There is no train at all. And the condition can be quite tough, especially in the rainy seasons, to reach the site. But once we are there, so that's the landscape. The upper picture shows you the Pahang Hill. And just below, it's the Tam Hang site. Tam Hang is the site that Jacques Fromager was excavating there. It's a rock shelter, 100 meters long rock shelter, and below it's a drawing made by the hand of Fromager. And he identified 3 different sectors: Tam Hang South, Tam Hang Central, and Tam Hang North. And that's there that we started our first excavation in 2003, not into the Jacques Fromager old excavation, but I mean just before his excavation. That's the trench left by Fromager to show you the tremendous work he did. We found some old villagers about 15 years ago that were working with him, and he spent the whole year from 1934 to 1935, 1 year, with hundreds of villagers working for him every day. And they excavated 100 meters long, this shelter, sometimes to 7 meters wide and 6 to 7 meters deep. And he removed tons and tons of clay and sediment that he put on the side. So our work was to, when we started to work there, was to make sure that we were not digging into Fromager's rubbish in order to find our own untouched by Fromager's site. And we started to find lots of stone tools. I'm not a specialist, but we call them Hoabinian culture. It's a special way of making these stone tools, and the layers are dated there around 13,000 to 3,000. So, and there seems to be a continuous occupation of the site. So that's why this site was very important to excavate for us from 2003 to 2009. Fromager found stone tools there, and also some human burials, not very old, dating around 6,000 to 3,000 years ago. But what is exceptional is that he found 7 complete individuals, complete skeletons, and 22 other burials. It's quite exceptional, the state of preservation of these bones for that region, because what I said earlier, that the soil are very acidic, and the bone doesn't preserve very well at all. Another proof, apart the cast of the skull that Professor Haventan had from Fromager in his office, is this label that I found in the collection of the Natural History Museum of Paris. There is this label from Tuân Lang. Tuân Lang is a Vietnamese, is a site that is nowadays in Vietnam. And below that you can read Indosinanthropus ninbinensis fr. So clearly Fromager was convinced that he found teeth from what would be a Homo erectus from the Ninh Binh province of Indochina. And luckily we found in the collections some of the teeth still bearing the same numbers detailed on the label. So Fromager had really this idea and really wanted to find the first humans in the region. I mean, at the same time in Indonesia, I mean, the century before, the Pithecanthropus had been found, and more recently in 1929, the first Sinanthropus had been found in China. And the French, they wanted to have their own Homo erectus. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that he was really convinced that he found our Indosinanthropus in Indochina. So after 2009, we found a new site on the same hill, Pahang Hill. And what we do after each excavation, we always spend like 4 to 5 days prospecting around, trying to find new sites. And it's actually our geologist, Philippe Duringer, who found the site. I think that Philippe really has a nose for finding things, and I think he's really one of the best geologists in the world right now. So that's the way to reach the site that he found. It's a bit of suspense. You walk a bit, so you see the vegetation is really like typical tropical rainforest, very dense vegetation. You see nothing. We are now at the top of a Pahang hill. You see the yellow arrow, so that's where will be taken the next slide. So, and there now, the blue arrow shows you from where will be taken the next slide. So that's, I mean, what you see when you are there at the top, you see nothing but just vegetation. And when you pass this, this screen of vegetation, you see that. So Philippe saw that, came back to the camp and told me, oh, you know, Fabrice, what I found. So no, come follow me. So I follow him. He went back there. I was following him. I saw that, and we moved a bit further. And clearly it was in entrance of a cave there at the top of a hill. We went down. We saw a huge opening. I mean, tremendous dimensions, 40 meters wide, and once you are inside, it's 30 meters high. Really huge entrance. So that's when we are at the bottom inside the cave. So we see a slope, 60 meters long slope from the bottom to the top of the entrance. So that was taken in 2009. At the bottom of the cave, we opened a test pit, and we opened like 1.5 meters by 1.5 meters, and we dug till we were finding anything, but we didn't find anything. So we stopped at 2 meters 30, but really like 25 meters, we found charcoals. So every charcoals, we picked them and noted the location where we found them. So that was in 2009. So once back to Paris, we had like about 10 charcoals sent up for dating. I don't know how it is. I mean, it takes time, and almost 1 year later, we got the results of the dating. And some of them were over 45,000. So I was like, wow. When I told that to Philippe, he couldn't believe that. I mean, and he said, so what do we want to do next? I mean, there is nothing there, no need to go back. I said, yeah, but you know, I mean, it's 45,000 at the bottom of this pit, and whatever we find, I mean, even if it's animal bones, to be 45,000 years old. Okay, so next year we came back, and we opened up a trench, and at 2 meters 35, we found some bones remain. And that's where we found the first skull. I'm here with Laura Shackelford from Illinois University. She was co-leading the team at that time. And as you can see, we're very happy on the picture with our first skull. So that's where we found, you see the tape, that's where we found the pieces of a skull. So the sediment is clay, only boring clay, really. And it's really difficult to excavate. You cannot use the trowel. You just have to use your hand, and you go centimeters by centimeters between your fingers. There is no way you can bring up some water because the next village is 1 kilometer away. No way to see the clay, so just the hand. But the chance we had is that since we have been going there regularly every year, so we could train the villagers, and now we are working with the children of the villagers that have been trained by the parents. And actually they have a very good feeling of what is bone and what is stone. So that was very, very helpful for us to have these people working with us. So 2 meters 30, we found element of a skull. not complete. We have a complete frontal, maxilla quite complete, right temporal, part of the occipital, and a right parietal. We did a direct dating uranium thorium on the skull. It gave 64,000. And on the site, this slide on the right shows you the stratigraphy section of the site. It's a 7 meters right now section. The first, I would say, 60 centimeters, we have dating going from 2000 to 4000. Then there is a gap. And from 2 meters, we are getting older, from 20 to then 40, and then regularly we go from 40 to 50, 60, and 70,000 years. We applied different method of dating. So we used the first layers, the C14 dating on the charcoals. And later on, we used the OSL dating on the quartz grain. But we realized that after something like 3 meters deep, we were getting the same edge from the OSL on the quartz grain. And Kira Westaway, who is in charge of the geochronology of the site, realized that the quartz grain was saturated at that depth, and she had to apply another method, still OSL, but based on the feldspar. And from 3 meters downwards to 7 meters, we got continuously all the edges from 45 to 50, 64, and 70, and now around 80,000. So 2010 we found the skull. 2 years later we found this quite complete mandible. Only one tooth left, the third right molar. All the other teeth have been broken post-mortem or lost post-mortem. And dated in layers around 64. 1 year later, we found a phalanx of the left hand of the index, around the same edge. We found a chin 2 years later, dated to 70,000. And around 6 meters, we found a piece of a rib, second left rib, dated to 70 to 80,000. And last year, we found a piece of another frontal dated to 80,000. And we got additional dating still being run on right now, but not on OSL, but on ESR, done on mammal teeth that we found associated with the frontal and the rib. And the data that are coming confirm this OSL dating. So we found about 7 individuals from different layers and different periods. Views on the maxilla and on the frontal. And you can see the state of preservation of the teeth is very poor. All the teeth are cracked. And it shows that, apparently some of these fossils have spent some time before buried inside the cave. Has been spent some time outside and before being buried into the sediment. When we have fragmented fossils, we want to compare them with other more complete fossils, so we need to complete them. And it's a work done by Sarah Friedlein from the team of Jean-Jacques. And she has been doing very nice, beautiful work, trying to reconstruct the last frontal we found. And same thing with the maxilla, it was incomplete, so she managed to reconstruct it. Same thing with the mandible, amazing work. So with these pieces, she did a morphometric analysis using semi-landmarks. And the result shows that the frontal, the first skull, you cannot really see, but you have to believe me, it's plot inside the modern human range. The maxilla also is plotted with modern humans. On the contrary, the mandible is plotted with not modern humans, but with other more archaic groups, and that's what I could check directly on the fossil itself before running the analysis. It's very small. Proportion is very, very small, but the thickness of the corpus between the M1 and the M2 is very thick and was really similar to what you can find in Langbua Floresiensis specimen, except that our specimen have a very beautiful chin and the Homo floresiensis doesn't have any chin at all. Did the same analysis with the other chin we found, and this one is plotted with more archaic groups, not with the modern humans. Views of the excavation. The first trench on the right and the second trench we opened 3 years ago on the left. Views of the second trench. So at the top, that's where we reach 7 meters deep. And we realized that last year, last December, we reached the bedrock of a cave at 7 meters deep. So last year we decided to fuse these two trenches, and I realized that it was getting quite dangerous because the walls made from clay were starting to crack and to fall. So we decided to consolidate the trench, and that's the general view of the site. On the left, bottom left is the excavation, and the entrance of the cave is at the upper right, taken last December. Here I was on the site for the radioactivity measurements for OSL dating. We did some palynology sampling as well to study the paleo environment of the site, and the first results show that this last 60,000 in the region is really localized to northern Indochina. The environment didn't change that much, so that's one information that we got. So to summarize, in the region, the oldest well-dated Homo sapiens for me are, so as I said, the Zirandong-1, Tian-1, Lunadong. Now we have Tampaling in mainland Southeast Asia, still Tabon, Nia, and Lida Ager. So what the fossils from Tampaling can tell us? So we have a presence of mosaic morphology of TPL2. TPL2 is the mandible, with some archaic features on TPL3, which is the chin, and fully modern morphology of TPL1, the frontal, TPL7, the second frontal. And this altogether suggests that there was quite wide morphological variability in the region about 17,000 years ago. And second remark I would say is that these Tampaling fossils, together with the Chinese one I mentioned earlier and the Indonesian one from Lida Ager, let us suggest that Homo sapiens was already present, as you said, Israel, with the whole Far East and Southeast Asia at least 70,000 years ago. This implies all the out of Africa exists than we generally think. So this is the team, and the people I wanted to thank on the list from the team, and also all these funding agencies that have been supporting us. Recently, the National Geographic, and for the French colleagues would recognize La Compagnie du Lit, who is our mécène now, one of our mécènes, our sponsors, and all the other institutions. Thank you very much.